Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM, and if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, how about giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to the channel to help us grow. Last year I took Scole to the Statfold Barn Railway's Model Railway Show, which is happening again this year on the 1st and 2nd of April. And Scole was the smallest layout in attendance. Despite the fact that it was an O-gauge layout, it was very much tiny, and I felt slightly emasculated by the sheer variety and size of other layouts on the show. When I went to the Lawrie show, I bumped into the organiser of the Statfold Barn Show, who asked me if I was going to come back to Statfold for the model show, and could I bring something that was smaller than Scole. Now, I think he was jesting, but for those of you who remember years ago, I started work on an A4 sized layout during one of the live streams. So I decided it would be time to dig that out and start working on that. And when I discussed it with a few of my friends, we decided it would be good to have a display of several tiny layouts to show what you could do with very little money and very little space. And with the show rapidly approaching, that meant I actually had to finish building the layout. I've given this all a coat on a very dried out Games Workshop long coat grey. They're very light. And I'm just painting up the bricks with another Games Workshop paint. And with the paint dry, it was time to use one of my favourite products that Games Workshop ever made. This was one of the washes, or I think now called shades. And you just slap it all over, it finds all the recesses, it gives you some texture, it makes it look like you're actually a good painter, which I'm not. Once the wash had dried, I was really impressed with how my wall was looking. However, it wasn't long enough to cover one side of the layout, so I had to cut and start painting another section. And then, in order to help disguise the join where I'd got this extra section, I started making some extra supports and other little bits for the wall. Altogether, it should come together and just help make it look like a complete piece. Which then meant more washing and more painting. And whilst I waited for that to dry, I started the final layers of paint on the coal stage, giving that a wash of the same magic stuff to make it look a lot better than it was. Now, you might think the bottom looks a bit blue, and that's because it is. The paint said it was Fenris grey, and I thought that was going to be a lot more grey than blue. But there we go. And now we position the crane. It's going to have to be like that, isn't it? In position like so. By which point my extra sectional wall had dried, so I could mount that and fit it in line with the others. I think he's going to stand somewhere like here. I think he's going to go about there. That bloke's definitely going in front of there. Been like, what's going on? Having selected my men, the next job was to paint them, and whilst I waited for them to dry, I made a start on building the water tower. And then it was time to place the first man on the layout for some real progress. And then it was back to building the water tower. Now, the other kits that I'd built from Ratio had been relatively simple, but this one just seemed to have that extra level of complexity and so many annoying little fiddly bits that actually it really tested my patience. Particularly, the instructions are fine, but they're very open to interpretation. You could build this a number of ways, and with all the tiny little bits that could be placed anywhere, this one I honestly found more stressful than enjoyable. The other kits have been beautiful, but this one, yeah, this was more of a challenge, and my clumsy sausage fingers are just not good at building things like this. My next job was to check the gauging and the clearances, and then I could start fitting everything down. I also attached a chain to the water tower, and then it was time for more ballast. Maybe a bit too much ballast there. At least the bloke in his corner looked pretty happy though. My next job was to get on and start putting down some of the scatter to cover the main part of the layout. And I decided I was going to go for like a dirt path surrounded by grass. That was my plan anyway, so I spread it out a load of PVA to be a first layer, and then spread the scatter over all of it. Why it's all so fiddly? I don't understand what is. I made all these things and they're all fiddly and rubbish. The water tower continued to vex me with all of its tiny annoying parts which I just could not get to go together. Compared to the others, there were so many tiny details that had to be cut out, assembled, so I just started making a pile of them so I knew what I was dealing with and to try and work out where I was going to put them all. This was actually quite challenging, and the buckets, they would just fly off into the nether.
We have the foreman here overseeing the work. He is unimpressed, and that's where we are.
Now, I've decided that all of this pathway here looks absolutely rubbish, so I've got, you can see there, the Metcalf paving slabs, which means I've got to scrape off all this very poorly done floor that I did, I think, on the live stream or just after, to try and make that happen. Yay! And in between that joyful task, I went back to trying to assemble some of the fine detail, in this case, a platform for the side of the water tower.
It's a slight faux pas. I realised that the roof there overhangs, so I've just had to chisel off that bit there to make enough room for my little platform there, because otherwise it wouldn't have really worked. Oh, that's not very straight, is it? No, just don't touch. No, that did not work as I anticipated.
I also installed some lights, which apparently should work.
Well, I'm not saying that's the worst bit of soldering I've ever seen, but it's got to be close. They are at least attached to the rails, but hiding that's now going to be a pain.
Having ascertained that it did indeed actually run, I could add some more ballast and then go and glue it all down, and then start doing some of the more fine little attachments to just make the layout look a little bit more pretty.
Let's see that. So I'm just going to... I have got a static grass applicator, and I've just not used it, so yeah, never mind.
I went back and added some more scatter to where the first layer hadn't really become attached to the board, and then, having completed my new path, added more scatter around that to complete the illusion. And with it all in place, I can mix up some PVA and then go and spread it all over my newly laid scatter just to help hold it all down and hopefully have a bit more success than the first time that I tried to put it down. This time, however, I was feeling a lot more satisfied with it, especially as I was actually using the 50-50 PVA to water mix. And whilst the PVA dried, I added a few more pieces of static grass, again without the applicator and just using a pair of tweezers, but I was relatively happy with the result. And then when it was actually dry, I got out the brush and dry brushed the ballast to make it look a little bit more ballasty. And then it was on to painting all of the fine bits of detail, like the drain for the water tower and some of the tools, buckets and other bits. In reality though, I'd been putting off actually making a start on doing the water tower, because I knew it was going to be a pain in the backside. There were so many flat surfaces which I was really dreading doing. So I made a start on the roof, as that was relatively simple, and then tidied up and painted the handrails and the ladder. I'd had 2 lamps to install, and installing one of them I'd broken it, so I'd had an idea. Yes, I know what it looks like, I'd broken it more, but it still functioned after a little bit of resoldering, and then I managed to install it into the water tower, replacing the rubbish one that came with it that didn't light up. So then I had to drill another hole in my baseboard. Playing with electronics had reminded me that I hadn't actually yet wired up my cassettes, so I installed screws on the side that I could attach crocodile clips to transfer power. Then I got the green stuff modelling putty out to fill in the hole that I'd had to drill to get the plug through for the LED, and then was the terrifying moment of finding out if I'd mucked it up. I hadn't, which was great. Next up was to start painting it, and as I mentioned, trying to do flat surfaces and make it look good was a real challenge. But I did it and got on with all the little tools as well.
What I'm working on now is the, not particularly complicated, but it's complicated to me, wires. So this is all the returns coming into there, into this socket, and I'll have a wire linking that to my transformer, which is currently there. Then for the positive side though, I have to have, these 2 other connectors that are going to go to my cassettes that are over there. So I need to have power running to that one, then to this one here, which is coming from underneath, that runs to the point, so that needs to be live all the time. That one needs to be live all the time, which is that one. And then the power to the switch, which is this, needs to be live all the time. And then I need to wire up the switch to go to these two, which correspond to the two there. It makes sense, but this is taking me far too long to figure out.
I was feeling really proud of how this was coming together, which left my final jobs to add the last of the scatter to fill in around the water tower, put the PVA glue on to hold it all into place, and then add the little details, the tools, the table, the little things that just make a model layout.
So this mess of cables back here, this all runs the lights. That's isolation for either siding. Red is for that one, black is for that one, and then this is plugged into the light. So, moment of truth. I haven't tested this, I haven't wired anything up, well, I haven't tested the wiring, but what will come on? Oh my god, I wired it up correctly. That's superb, isn't it? Both working. So they're not flickering. Well, not flickering as much in real life. That's just the camera, but there we go.
My layout was now complete, if untested, so come find out if it works on the 1st and the 2nd of April at the Statfold Barn Railway's Model Railway Show, and help judge between me and my friends' layouts to work out who has made the best working layout in a tiny space. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's been put together over quite some time, because I've been working on this layout in the background for years now. I know it doesn't show it, but there we go. Coming up on the screen now are a couple of other options for model railway content. And of course, thanks for watching. Do come and say hello at the weekend. See you later, guys. Ta-ra.